Welcome, everyone, to the next edition of the Care CEO Success Stories podcast. My name is Adam James of Springup PR. And today, my special guest is Michael Butcher. Now, Michael, who will introduce himself in his own words in a moment, is a financial director of Blackadder Corporation Limited. And Blackadder Corporation Limited is a family-run group of 6 care homes. And what Michael is going to be doing today on this episode is talking about how he's got a 50-year plan for his care home provider. So we're all, our ears are all pricked for sure. And so, Mike, as I say, Michael will introduce himself in a moment. As I say, this is the Care CEO Success Stories podcast, and our mission is to everyone involved in the care sector to be inspired and to learn from key leaders in the care home provision sector. We've had some amazing guests. We will continue to have some amazing guests. So please make sure you subscribe. Give us a like and all that stuff that you do that helps promote this series. And please go and have a look at some of the back episodes. We cover and have covered pretty much everything on this series of episodes. And I'd like to say, if you ever want to grow, develop, or start a care home group or a single care home, listen to all our episodes. You've just basically got all the guidance from people, as I say, have been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. So make sure you please have a listen. So, as I say, before Michael introduces himself, my name's Adam of Springup PR, as well as hosting this episode. I run Springup PR, and we help care home providers get more inquiries via PR and digital marketing. And if you head over to springup-pr.com, you'll find a whole load of free resources, webinars, videos, blogs, interviews on people and care home groups achieving exactly as I've just mentioned. So make sure you go and have a look. So, without any further ado, as I say, let's get into this episode. So, Michael, thank you. Why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Adam. Thanks very much for having me. Who am I? I am the finance director of Blackadder, chartered accountant and absolute data geek, self-badged data ninja, and very much the head of the back office for our care home group. We talk about running a care home business in that order of priority. So we've got a team dedicated to care, we've got a team dedicated to the homes and the properties, and I do pretty much all the business side. So everything from finance to HR to IT to GDPR to data migrations, everything that can be brought down into an acronym, that's my bag.
Yeah, wow. Okay, great. And it's a family group, as I understand, and I think this is kind of relevant to what the topic is today. Do you want to just say a little bit more about the history of the group?
Yeah, so we're 30 years old next year. Actually, no, crumbs. No, we're not. Yes, 30 years old. There we are. Said the accountant who can't do mental maths. We started in 1997 when my sister and I were sort of moderately old teenagers. My mother was a bit bored, and my father was going through the Exchange and Mart one day, saw a care home and thought, that looks interesting, looks like a cheap property. And that started the journey. Back in 1997, we bought our first care home. We're now up to 6, specializing in complex dementia, veering toward the nursing registration side of things, but we own 3 nursing homes and 3 residential homes.
Yeah.
Largely across the Midlands, 211 beds, roughly 275 team members. A sufficiently sized and complicated group.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, well, congratulations. So, well, let's get straight in. You've a 50-year plan for Blackadder. So tell everyone a little bit more what that looks like and how you think about it? And
I think being a family business gives you the joy of having a very different timeline to anybody else.
mm,
We don't think about our next funding round. We don't think about the next 5 year business plan, 7 years.
mm,
We think very much about what's the next generation, or indeed what's the generation after that going to inherit.
yeah,
So our business plan does have to take into account the fact that we are thinking about my as yet unborn grandchildren,
mm,
and what do we want them to have? Do we want them to have a business?
mm,
That's part of our strategy. And if so, how do we pilot our business forward through not just the current turmoil,
mm,
whatever that might what
mm,
form that takes this week, but actually what does the next 10, 20, and 30 years of this country look like? How
mm,
do demographics change? What's our workforce going to look like in 30 years' time?
mm.
How do we prepare our business for that? And how do we work with our commissioning partners to make sure that we're not just thinking about their requirements this year, but we're thinking, what are your requirements in 5 years' time, and how do we build our business to maintain that?
In terms then of, let's just pick one of them. Let's go straight on this workforce issue. There's always, trials and tribulations, as we all know. Um, so how does that look for you, and what kind of things are you thinking about when it comes to like a 50 year look into the future plan?
Adam, you've fallen into the trap of putting me right on my current soapbox, so I'm gonna stick with it. I am incredibly worried about the next 30 years of workforce in the United Kingdom.
Mm,
I'm not just talking about immigration, and I think that has a part to play. And I
mm,
think we migrate through the next decade or so. I think you'll see a
mm,
change in our immigration strategy. There has to be. The reason for that is the underlying fertility data. And that seems to be showing that we are seeing fewer children being born on average to every woman across
mm,
England, Wales, and Scotland. Now, just to put this into context, we need to have a sustainable population. You need to have a birth rate of 2.1 children per female. The UK average at the moment, I think, has just dipped below 1.6. It's
mm,
1.2 children per female in Scotland. It's
mm,
1.8, actually, interestingly, for families of immigrants. So
mm,
there's huge amounts of variation, but fundamentally, we don't have enough children being born in this country. Why does that matter? It matters for two reasons. The first is one simply of income tax generation. If you have fewer workers, you don't have as much taxation.
mm,
Therefore, how do you pay for future care needs? And as I see it, our future care needs are going to be much more funded by the state because people are living longer with more complex levels of needs. We're going to be spending our own money on buying a house, and younger generations can't afford to do that. So, where's the asset to fund your future retirement? Plus, also, we've got this generation of this boomer generation coming through, and they will be spending their money on the nice to haves. So again, their asset numbers are probably lower. They'll be looking to pass on that intergenerational wealth. So they will more likely than not be funded by the state in their later care need when they're at their most complex. So where's the taxation coming from to pay for all of that? The second problem is around where are the workers? So there's a number in economic theory that you need roughly 3 workers for every person aged over 65 to not only to support the whole system. We are currently at 3.6,
mm,
and that's going to decline in the next 30 years by the time roughly I hit retirement. Not sure that will ever happen, but
mm,
by the time I'm in my 70s, that number will drop to 3 or below. So I have a genuine concern about the future workforce, which means that we need to be piloting our business towards a strategy of efficiency in workforce labor, but also making sure that we are able to recruit and be a place where people want to come and work. So that's about always thinking 2 steps ahead across the rest of the market. How do we become attractive as an employer? But more importantly, what values do we espouse as a family? And therefore, what people do we want working for us?
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and the fertility rate data that you point out is yeah, and the rising elderly population. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, when you look at it like that, it's like an issue to be very, very conscious of, and I guess it will creep up unless it's thought about properly, which is a thing in itself. um, it may well creep up and become even more of a crisis than it may feel like right now.
Adam,
Mm,
this is a crisis that we're already facing across,
yeah,
across the Western world.
yeah,
It's not unique to the UK. We're seeing the same issues across Europe and
mm,
America. Um, in fact, actually, if you go to Greece, Italy, Portugal,
mm,
they're already seeing lower fertility rates than we are.
mm,
A wide number of reasons for that. Even in nations such as Nigeria, where the fertility rate is above 2 and comfortably
mm,
in those instances, they're still seeing a reduction in fertility rate. So
mm,
Nigeria, I think 10 years ago, 8 was the average. Now we're down to 6.
mm,
So the numbers are changing drastically across the world. The the second point is that we're already seeing the impact of this in the education sector. I am blessed where I live. I live near the New Forest, and the my children's school, which is literally a 10-minute walk from me, is an amazing, outstanding one form entry primary school. Uh, they have normally had a waiting list, and the catchment area has been as little as a mile and a half around the school.
mm,
It's it's remarkable how good this school is, and the numbers stack that up. They now have in their reception year 4 places. During COVID, seems to be a reduction in the number of children being born, and everyone thought, "Oh, we'll catch up." All the people who were going to have kids, there'll be a bounce, it'll catch up. This year R was meant to be that catch up year, and it just simply hasn't happened. So a school that probably, it's I think 32, 34 children per class. In their bottom year, they've now got 28. And that's the level of, you want to call it fertility crisis, but lack of children that we already have coming through. And
mm,
in 18, 20 years' time, those children are going to be our workforce. It's just
yeah,
simply not enough of them. And given that we have an aging population and more people who will require care and support in
mm,
any format, let alone care homes, which I really specialize in, but the at-home care, the domiciliary care, even the unregulated personal assistant market,
mm,
which I think is going to be much broader and much more important as we go forward. We're all recruiting from the same pool.
mm,
Where are these workers going to come from? So
mm,
I think it's a challenge that the whole of society is going to have to grapple with. But we're already seeing local, around me, local private schools of the sort of the mid market or the lower market where the fees have always been quite low. They're saying that their reception year ones are not enough children coming through, so they cannot sustain their business.
mm.
Especially with the VAT implications of schools, which we won't go into. But we're already seeing the implications of this across our whole society.
I just thought, of course, then you have AI coming into the picture, and to what extent AI will replace certain human roles. I guess that also comes into the equation.
In part,
Mm,
but I think the care will always be something that needs to be human to human. We've
mm,
actually just implemented a new bit of software today, and it's gone live, which has been really exciting, which is a way of our care plans being reviewed by AI to give us actionable insights to say, well, here are some inconsistencies and here's some language that isn't quite best practice. This is work that our managers and our deputies and
mm,
our very experienced care staff, it would take them hours to do. They've been reviewing these care plans in some instances for years and they've never picked up. So you're absolutely right. It is going to replace some work. It's going to be even better than some humans can actually
mm,
do. And
mm,
we are, I think, for me, see some roles being replaced by AI. We've seen this already in the accountancy sector where junior level roles in the big four firms have been replaced by AI and literally thousands of jobs have not been opened up to graduates. So those graduates have got to go somewhere. They will replace
That'd be
people.
like lower level entry graduates. Is that,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you'll see people sort of, the lower level entry graduates who would go into a top tier accountancy firm will go
Mm,
mid tier go entry level go, okay, I need to find a job. Where do I go? And you'll see people being pushed down from perhaps professional jobs into care. That's not a slight on them. I think care is a profession. I think care is incredibly hard to do. And I think the people who will be coming into it will be pleasantly surprised about what care can offer them. I think
mm,
they're pretty well suited actually because of the younger generation's emotional intelligence. I think they are actually very well suited to care. But we're going to have to really work hard as a sector to attract and retain these individuals who perhaps had more lofty goals or thought I'll go to university and I'll earn so much more money. And then now all of a sudden they are quote unquote just a carer. No one is ever
mm,
just a carer.
mm,
But I
yeah.
think we need to be very clear to make sure that the professionalism, the career opportunities, and the enjoyment of being in care, and frankly, the flexibility and ability to do so many different roles, that needs to be front and center of what we're doing over the next 10, 15 years to make
Mm,
sure that we retain our workforce.
yeah. And when it comes then to you thinking about going back about running a care home provider, I mean, this is quite long. Well, this is what we're talking about, right? Is a the longer period of time picture.
Mhm.
How does that come? How does that touch you then when you are, as FD, then looking at, everything from a business perspective?
I think it makes it easier in some respects because we've never bound ourselves by a budget or an expectation
Mm,
or outside investors saying, oh, we want to exit by this date, therefore you need to
mm,
achieve outcome Y here.
mm,
We've always been, what do we need to do next as a business, as a family, in
mm,
order to take the care homes to the next level? And
mm,
how do we grow and how do we develop? So for example, we recently did a refurbishment of one of our care homes in the Cotswolds, North Beach
mm,
Court.
mm,
It was not easy. It took
mm,
too long. We made mistakes, but we've now
mm,
got an amazing asset that, if you look at it from a very traditional investment perspective,
mm,
makes no sense to do what we suggested. What we
mm,
should, a strict investment thesis, we should either have bought it and converted it into flats,
mm,
or we should traded it in a different way. But
mm.
because we have this long-term vision, we're able to make different and I think better investment decisions about how we use our capital and how we think about how each asset should and could be used.
Yeah, I see. Interesting. So, and so but you very clearly in your mind, this is like, we are in the care home business and you're in the care home business for a long time. It's not as though you're thinking, we will be jettisoning out because of these concerns that you're highlighted, which, reflects generally across the board, across society as a whole. But you are firmly in like we're in this for the long term, and it's beyond me. It's as we say in the next the generations to come.
Well, I wouldn't want to be in any other sector, Adam. To be honest with you,
Mm.
which I don't get me wrong, I've gone through. It feels like all of them actually. I've been in construction. I worked briefly at Merlin Entertainments did a contract there
Mm.
again at C. I worked in Grant Thornton and some other smaller
Yeah.
practices. So I've had that varied
Mm.
career. I've done some interesting things, but I think if you get into care and you find that you have a passion for it,
Mm.
and if that passion grabs you and you stick with
Mm.
it,
Mm.
you end up wanting to see the sector improve.
Mm.
You want to see it change and get better, and you start to do weird things like start advocating for the sector and trying to develop yourself so you develop the sector with it. So, and hey, never say never, right? If someone comes along and says, "Here's loads of money," okay, what's best for the family is not necessarily best for the business in the long
Yeah.
term. So
Yeah.
there is always that culture clash between you know us as a family and us running the business and what we want to do there.
Yeah.
But I can't see a reason why
Mm.
I would want to walk away from the sector. this is the sector that we're passionately invested in and involved in.
Fabulous. And tell me a bit. You touched on the commissioning picture, long term, and always that's obviously, of course, front of mind for many of us. Tell me where you are on that, and you're thinking, perhaps bringing in some of these, taxation and workforce issues that come into play here on the commissioning side.
So the vast majority of commissioning that I think we're seeing at the moment is very much aligned to higher levels of need, more complex care, all tranches of social care. So from the individuals, the children leaving care at the age of 18, they now have much more complex levels of care as younger adults. We have more cases of alcohol-induced dementia that we're seeing, people living with multiple comorbidities as they approach their life. We're seeing more men coming into social care than I think we normally would, so into older person care homes particularly, and living with some very complex dementia, which men tend to be more physically aggressive, and that creates certain challenges. So the key commissioning word that I keep coming back to is complexity. I don't think it's complicated. I think care is actually at its fundamental core quite simple. How do you give the person what they need in order to meet their needs and achieve the outcomes for that person? It's just increasingly complex to do that, and you need to be working on multiple different levels as an organization, but also as a frontline carer to be able to do that, which I think is quite exciting. It's mentally stimulating, and it means that we really have to focus on how we train and how we support and how we coach our teams, which huge amounts of pressure on our management teams in order to do that on a day-to-day basis. I think that the model of residential care in a care home, I think that's dead. I think it's been dead for a long time. I think there are niches that work, particularly higher end private care, where it's essentially a care hotel, and that it wouldn't surprise me if we started seeing more people thinking, okay, I'm in my later 70s, I'm going to retire into an environment where my needs are mostly met by myself, but I can bring in support. I think the unregulated personal assistant market, and people talk about the Uberization of that horrible word, but having that as a fragmented draw down as you want to solution, I think it needs to be regulated to some extent, and I think people should be registered if they're doing it. I think if you're a childminder, you have to be registered. So if you're caring for an older person, why aren't you registered? But I think having a model where an older person, or more likely their children, can go onto an app and say, well, tell you what, my dad needs a couple of hours on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning just to help them get up and get away, because I can do Tuesday, Thursday, and maybe help at the weekends. But the rest of the time, dad's fine and can look after himself. That actually, there's a level of support and need there that I think the most domiciliary care providers can't provide because it's too fragmented. How do they find a worker to do that? But if we have it in a system that is designed to be fragmented, designed to be more like gig work, that probably does work better. So I think you're going to see more fracturing of the sector. And we're going to be talking much more around support, care, and health in the future as three very separate needs, with the health being dealt with by the NHS, support being dealt with by personal assistants, and care being a very regulated professional sector.
Yeah, interesting. And in terms, I don't know if you have any particular views, but I'm sure you do, on the financing of social care and where the money is going to come from, on the politics of it in terms of priorities. When will looking after us all in older years come into play as a political priority. I don't know if you have any particular thoughts on this.
Um, I do, and I don't think they're particularly positive. There is we have a system now that fundamentally is designed to be private pay. The reason for this is where social care came from. It came from a thought originating in the 1600s with the Poor Laws, came through to the amendment of that 1834. Sorry, my son's been studying GCSE history, and therefore I know this stuff.
They bring home interesting stuff, don't they, from school? Yeah.
It is. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Good. My wife was helping him with his Cold War knowledge the other day, and
Yeah.
she learned something.
I know it's good, but it's fact. I mean, my daughter, when she brought and continues to bring stuff home on particularly on history, it's like, wow, how interesting. Yeah.
So we start with the Poor Law, and that amends to the concept of the deserving poor and the undeserving poor, and the undeserving poor get stuck in workhouses and so on and forth. But it was always based on local charity, and it's the first instance where we have this concept of locals being taxed essentially to give to their local community and then support the deserving poor. That when we then have the split of health and social care, the creation of the NHS in the 1940s, care was never properly defined.
No.
But fundamentally, it was about housing, because that's what the deserving poor needed. They needed a house, they needed somewhere to live, and if there was health needs, well, that goes to the NHS. Where we never expected to be is a society where we have people living into their hundreds with very complex levels of mental health and physical need that we now define as care. Because we've never addressed that, what we now have is a political system that has been, I think, whether you could say deliberately or not deliberately, but it has been structured in such a way that the assumption is that it will be privately funded for the majority, and that those individuals will subsidize the local authorities. In other words, this concept of local charity still continues. It's just not really explicit. I think we're now at the point where politicians of whatever hue you choose to name have seen this problem for the last 20, 30 years, have collectively not chosen to change anything because it's politically difficult, or there's no votes in it, or for whatever reason. Or in the case of Theresa May, when they did try to make a proposal, it was shouted down as a death tax. And as a result, I think you have to say this is a deliberate political decision. That private pay social care is a form of taxation, if being unkind, form of inheritance tax, or even a form of charitable giving, if I'm being particularly kind. But it's a way of getting wealth from society and funding other individuals and funding public service. Until we as a country get together and have a conversation and say, actually, this is not what we want, there will be no political will to change that. I think what is interesting is that over the next 20 years, as the boomer generation gradually comes towards social care and they start thinking about this intergenerational transfer of wealth, they're suddenly thinking about their very expensive houses, particularly down in the southeast, and going, great, I'd get to give this inheritance all to my children. Actually, no, you don't if you require social care or social support. And I think social care will also go from being a minority service to a majority service, where the majority of society get touched by it in some form or other as a service user, as a family member, as someone who is employed in or adjacent to the sector. And as those 2 points start to coalesce, you're going to find a society that wants to change how we do social care. But until we reach that point, politicians have no desire to change it because, quite frankly, the financial consequences are imbalancing, and we'd have to raise taxation from somewhere else. So I think it is easier to say, okay, if you're lucky enough to live your life without the need of social care or support, fine, great, you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you have to pay for it.
Mm.
Or we end up
Yeah.
with a sort of a compromised position where
Mm.
you pay for the housing, but the state pays for the care, and it gets
Mm.
messy and complicated,
Mm.
and
Mm.
still not wasn't going to work. So
Mm. Yeah, I see. Thank you for sharing that. And also, before we came on the episode today, you talked reference to kind of ticking bomb possibilities around, for example, Welltower's acquisition of Berkshire and HC1. So, tell me what you're thinking here and what you see as a possibility.
um, so the CMA are currently investigating Welltower's acquisition of Barchester and HC1. So I'm going to tread carefully because this is active.
Yeah.
But here's my thesis. If my assumption is correct that the majority of care homes, I'm just talking about older person care
Mm.
homes for now,
Mm.
if the majority of them are going to end up being local authority or indeed NHS funded, because people will live for longer, come into care homes later in that care journey, having spent the majority of their money from the sale of the house on their care previous to that.
Mm.
Also, they come in with more complex levels of need. Then the amount that the local authority and the NHS are going to have to pay in absolute terms will, in theory, be higher because higher percentage of people, but also more complex levels of need. The real estate investors who end up owning the properties will be demanding a rent from their operators, which will be, at the moment, I think figures that I'm seeing being bandied around are somewhere between 8 and 11% of revenue. CPI uplifts only. And that rent, therefore, is only going to increase. We don't have to go too far back to Four Seasons, as an example,
Mm.
but instances where those models don't quite work.
Mm.
And if those real estate investors end up holding assets that are largely local authority funded and NHS funded, and if you have a higher number of residents who are funded by local authority or NHS, but the amount of funding that goes to those entities for the care for them doesn't increase in proportion, the amount of money that's going to be able to be paid back up in rent doesn't work. And you end up in a position where care home operators can no longer afford to pay the rent on their assets. Now, where you're paying down debt to a bank, where you've got a mortgage on the property, which is the position we're in, I think you have a degree of flexibility. You're still exposed, but you can refinance, and the bank can take a commercial view. And also because you're paying down your equity, if you're
Mm.
50% loan to value, the bank can take a different view. But if you don't have any assets behind you and you're paying 100% out in rent rather than in debt, how do you resolve that with your landlord?
Mm.
I have some experience in commercial property, and landlords take a very dim view of someone who can't pay their rent. And this, I think, is the ticking time bomb that I'm referring to. It's not a now issue, and I don't think it's a in 7 years' time issue. I think it's in 14, maybe even 21 years' time. And I'm
Mm.
thinking in terms of private equity and real estate investors as
Mm.
they financing cycles.
Mm.
If we go 20 years into the future, investors are going to want to take their money out of these real estate investment funds. And if you're in a position where the rents don't quite match up and valuations don't quite stack, and you don't have the liquidity within the funds in order to achieve these exits, resolving that could be an issue.
Mm.
And I think it could potentially impact on the provision of care and therefore on individuals. So I, for
Mm.
one, am really grateful that the CMA is actually looking at the acquisition by Welltower of Barchester and HC1, because I think it sets a really useful precedent to say, actually, there are risks to
Mm.
third party this propco-opco structure. How do we manage this as a country, and
Yeah.
what do we allow to happen, and what percentage can we allow to happen? I think
Yeah.
that's a
Mm.
valuable thing in order to provide some financial sustainability to our sector.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, if you're in the sector, you know about these models and the operators that work by them. So, as you said, just having the spotlight on it and some scrutiny, yeah, definitely can't be a bad thing.
exactly. And I think where we are in social care at the moment is,
Mm.
I think providers by and large, particularly in older person care homes, I think we had a challenging Q4 last year, Q1 this year. There was some bug went round in Q4, which I'll be completely candid here. During COVID, we got very lucky. We had 24 deaths across our entire portfolio of roughly 211 beds. In Q4 of last year, we had 25 deaths.
Right.
More, so just to put that in
Yeah,
words, more
understood.
people died in 3 months last year than did across the whole of COVID.
Yeah.
That level of occupancy drop is not, it's being reported to us that it's not across other operators throughout the sector. So I think in the main, we've had a tough end to last year. Occupancy is recovering, but slowly. And we're still hearing that a large number of other operators are struggling to get their occupancy up. And so as we go into this year with the change in employment law, with the risks inherent within the Fair Pay Agreement coming through, with fuel costs going through the roof, and therefore oil and gas and all of our heating costs. So there are some real financial pressures on providers. So having that concept of sustainability and a bedrock that we can work to is more important now than ever.
That's great. Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing this. It's the thing about these the episodes is that we have so many different takes and viewpoints and focuses, and the kind of things we've been covering today. I can tell you right now, with the focus on we haven't really touched previously. So that's fabulous. Thank you. And so much for us all, to be thinking about, for the long term. I mean, that was the aim of this episode, was the 50-year plan. And, when we think about exactly these topics that we're talking about today, you can see why, 50 years is something well worth thinking about. So thank you for that. Michael, is there anything we've not touched upon that you would particularly want to share that we've not talked about or covered?
I think there are two things. One is self-serving, the other is for the wider sector. The self-serving point first, if you've not heard about it, there is a little podcast called Welcome to Social Care, which I'm the host of. We talk about how providers it's about provider stories to help those entering care as a service user, horrible phrase, as a user of care, or even a family member. It's all the things that us providers want you to know. So appreciate that this normally goes out to providers. If you want to get involved, find me on LinkedIn, Michael Butcher at Blackadder, and be delighted to have a chat to have you on. The second thing is, in the hope that someone who is not involved in the sector yet hears this, come and get involved. It's an amazing sector. We have so many opportunities to work in the care homes, but also in support levels. No 2 days are the same. And frankly, and most importantly, just about every single role is AI proof. So it is a sector for life, and I'd recommend it to anyone.
AI proof, such a good word. I like it. Great. Michael, thank you very much for being on the Care CEO Success Stories podcast.
Adam, thank you so much for having me.